Dr. Corrie, I think we all wish that we could be with kids for 3 weeks and do the work that you do and learn in the way that you are teaching and engage with young people. But for youth ministers in their context and in their place, what are ways that we can do peacemaking and justice work in our context, in our congregations, in our youth groups?
I think there are a number of ways. I mean, some are kind of how you set the table in the first place, and then others are some specific practices. Think about, and I recognize that middle school ministry and upper school ministry is going to look differently, and you have to be attentive to sort of where they are developmentally. But in as much as you can, creating some democratic structures so that they have a say in what you're doing, so that they have a chance to determine what are the big questions you want to explore, what is it that you want to do at this retreat. We've got a problem. How are we going to solve this together? That in itself is inviting them to take some ownership for what they're doing, to become invested in it. But also, again, it's sending that signal like, I actually trust you to be a partner, that I can share power with you. Never giving up that, never disguising the fact that you are still the adult and that you'll always have power in ways that you can't abuse, so you don't want to ignore that, but to at the same time say, we can make this youth group what you want. We can share power here and shape this to what we want to do. So I think you can set the stage to begin with that incorporates some democratic decision-making structures, even if it's a smaller group that are part of that, because maybe not all of them want to do that, but finding those ways. I also think there are ways of doing Bible study that could actually contribute to peacemaking. On the very granular level, there are cognitive dispositions that help people be more predisposed to peace. And that is, for instance, not thinking in black and white terms, not thinking in binary ways. And the Bible is anything if not contradictory and not black and white. We try to make it black and white. We try to make the Bible this essentially self-help manual or a magic 8-ball where you can go to it with your question and you're going to get a clear, coherent answer. And that's not what the Bible is for or how it works. So if you do Bible study where you actually point out the contradictions or point out that it's a cacophony, it's not one voice. There's all different voices happening. And so if God is present in our sacred text, then somehow God is holding within God's self a whole lot of contradictory voices. How can we start to develop a mind that can hold the paradoxes and complexities of reality? That it isn't good guys versus bad guys. That our heroes in the Bible, like say David, is very complex, right? So let's sit with that. So there's so many things about the Bible that I think just the way you teach it, if you're pointing at the complexity, could actually develop a mind of peace, right? The way we do mission trips, are we intentional about not seeing the people we're doing mission with as people we're doing mission on? Are we doing a mission trip that's about showing our kids to count their blessings, or are we doing something that's actually something that the community actually needs and wants? Could we envision a mission trip that isn't about going and fixing something for some other group of people, but actually going and simply listening to their stories? Fact-finding missions as a form of mission instead of building a house mission. Not that those aren't great trips, but blowing open mission that might have us see other cultures and other people differently and allow them to be real human beings for us and not just the backdrop for our own spiritual formation. Again, how do we do retreats in a way that deepens our relationships with each other, so that even if you have a youth group in which everyone appears to be the same, everyone appears to be from a certain class background or a certain racial background, or even if they all go to the same school, they are still not all the same, right? So how do we take the opportunity in retreats to get deeper with each other, to get real with each other, to see how we are different from each other and hear each other's narratives, so that we can actually think about there's diversity within us. And so then how do we extend that to the diversity we encounter out in the world? How do we, again, live together in a way that even when we have conflict, we name it and we address it, right? Instead of avoiding conflict and essentially letting it fester until some people just drop out of the youth group rather than dealing with it. Or, we just kind of expect people to, swallow their feelings and keep going. How do we as youth workers learn a little bit about some basic conflict resolution skills so that when we find out that, this girl and this girl are in a fight, that we could actually help them navigate that conflict so they can learn those skills. How do we talk about gender in the midst of our youth group? We often take as an assumption that the girls should go talk separately and the boys should talk separately, and there's wonderful reasons why they should do that some of the time. Sometimes we need to be together. Sometimes, while we're separate as girls, we need to talk about the way that interpersonal violence happens among girls in particular ways because we're socialized to be nice. How do the boys then have hard conversations about toxic masculinity and how they're being shaped as men that perpetuates violence in particular ways? How do they talk about rape culture, for instance? And how do we talk about, as young women, the ways in which we reinscribe sexism, even in the way that we fight with each other or that we participate in that? So there's all kinds of ways that we can have these conversations with our youth group, in the way that we do Bible study, in the way that we lead our youth groups, in the way that we do mission. And then finally, in the way that we do worship. Do we bring into our prayers what's going on in the world? Do we bring into our prayers the deep violence that we're experiencing in various ways when we come into this room? How do we talk about the way that the sacraments can address this? I'm United Methodist. I take very seriously the liturgy of baptism that asks, will you resist the spiritual forces of wickedness and do all in your power to resist injustice? Why don't you go over those liturgies that are part of your tradition and talk about what does it mean to resist the spiritual forces of wickedness? This is what people said on your behalf when you were baptized. Let's talk about that. So draw on your own tradition to pull out the peace-building strains that are in your own tradition and help them both learn their own tradition and learn peace-building at the same time.